Welcome to our very first episode of Empire Law Firm with Deborah Song, the podcast about personal injury and car accidents serving Inland Empire in California. I'm Abby, and today we're doing something special. We're going to explore the expertise and background of our co-host and expert attorney, Deborah Song, in what we affectionately call the U interview. We want to get to know how Deborah Song became Deborah Song, the founder of the Inland Empire-based law firm, Empire Law Firm. That's exactly what we're here to explore today. Deborah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. A lot of people don't just wake up one day and decide to become a lawyer. There's usually a story behind it. What was it that inspired you to become a lawyer?
First started, I think in middle school. I found myself spending my spare time watching C-SPAN. Not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's basically like live footage of people just in the White House voting on bills and very just political topics. And I didn't understand anything, but I just remember thinking like, oh, that's really cool. I would love to sit in there and vote on things and make law and make changes into fruition. Then we had a middle school project where we had to decide and present what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I decided to pick the President of the United States. So I did a whole step-by-step guide on how to become the President of the United States. And one of the main things was that you had to go to law school, although I don't think that's accurate, but you had to go to law school, be a lawyer, be a judge, do something in the political world. And I was like, okay. So from that point, I was already thinking I'm going to go to law school. Now, when I went to undergrad, because you have to have a bachelor's degree if you want to attend law school, I was trying to get through my undergrad as fast as I could. And I wanted to get my career started as far as being in the political field. But once I started to grow up and gain more knowledge and did more research on what it really takes to be in politics, I started to realize it's not about what school you go to, although that's very important. It's more so about making connections. And growing up, I didn't have any of that. My parents came from Korea. They barely spoke any English, and there was no friends, no families, no family friends that were lawyers or even in the political world or in the field of law. So it was really hard for me to see myself actually make my way through the chain and find my way into the White House. So I thought, okay, maybe I won't be the president. Maybe I can't do that. Maybe I'll resort to being the mayor of the city. It's like, that's something you can just vote for. And if people in the city, they will vote for you during the campaigns and whatnot. But, with time going on, I started realizing it involves a lot of brown nosing and a lot of shoulder rubbing that I'm just not into. Then I said, okay, forget politics. I don't even like politics. I don't even want to do any of this. I want to actually make a change. I don't want to focus my career on collecting fees and donations from people in the community to fund a campaign that may or may not be successful just to serve a term and maybe make a difference, maybe not. Maybe I would just be a figurehead. So I still have a goal as of now to retire as a judge. But before I do that, I need to advocate for the people, and I need to know my surroundings and the people in our community so that when I am making those decisions later on, I'm making the right decision. And it's not just going straight from law school to judge. I think being a judge involves a lot of societal common sense and knowledge of what exactly it is that people find value.
That's really inspiring. I love hearing your story and the transition you went from having this dream of politics to seeing that you can make a real change by being a lawyer. So once you made that decision to pursue law, walk me through it. Where did you go to law school and what's your educational background? I know you touched on it a little bit, but are there any key credentials or certifications that are important for people to know about you?
I don't think so. As far as law school goes, I first actually started off at Whittier Law. I just wanted to be somewhere local and I wanted to make sure that it was a school that was acknowledged by the American Bar Association. And in Orange County, because there's no ABA accredited law schools in the IE where I grew up in the Inland Empire. So the closest place would have been Orange County. And there's three places there. There's Western State, there used to be Whittier, and then there's UCI. And I knew that I had to go in part-time because I have no connections. I didn't have any experience in law. And so if I went in part time, I knew I would have trouble finding a job after I got out of law school and passed the bar because I just have no experience other than sushi restaurants. So I ended up going to Whittier because that place had a part time program and they also offered me a scholarship. So I went over there, I went to Whittier, and then after the first semester was over, they give you like a window opportunity similar to undergrad where you have a designated date and time for you to register for classes. And the classes that I wanted in the summer, that particular day that I had to register, there was an announcement that was being made at Whittier, and the head board of Whittier School out in Whittier said that they were going to make some kind of announcement in our mock courtroom. So they gathered all of us there, and I'm sitting there trying to get my classes for the summer. And then they announced that they were shutting down and that they were shutting down within 2 years. And what that meant was I had the choice of either going full time to finish my degree before the school shuts down, or I have to transfer and go to a different school. But because of the dilemma, I didn't want to be forced into a full-time position and not have a job lined up when I got out. And then also the professors had no idea either. So the professors were already talking about finding their new job, and I knew that wasn't a good place to be. So I ended up transferring. I went to Western State instead of Chapman. Chapman has a full-time program too, but they were daytime, part-time only. And I worked during the day. I ended up finding a job during the day, and then I would go to school at night. So Western State, that's in Irvine, they offer a nighttime, part-time program. It's funny because the last year that I was actually there, the Western State was owned by a bigger conglomerate company who owned multiple education facilities. And one of the only law school there was Western State that they owned. And that big conglomerate, they actually filed bankruptcy during my last year. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's all over again. I have to start all over. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But I took the risk because had I transferred out and went to a different school at that point in my law school career, I would have had to start all over from 1L, because 1L meaning first year, because these law schools, they don't want to take on more than 1 year's worth of units from other schools because they want to be the one to be able to prep you properly. So I just took the risk and said, I just hope this school stays alive. And fortunately it did. So I was able to finish out at Western State in Irvine.
What did you think law would be like versus what you actually discovered it was once you got into it?
When I worked at this firm, by this point, I moved on to my second personal injury firm, working part-time and going to school part-time. The boss there at the time, he was never in the office. He was always out vacationing and going to Disneyland, having fun with his family, going to Cabo and doing all these things, and he was rarely in the office. And so I imagined that once I got my degree, I would have a similar lifestyle. And so I take the bar, and by that time I was working at a different firm. It was a trial firm, so I could get some trial experience. And my very first day, once I got sworn in as a litigation attorney, I got slapped on my desk. I kid you not, just physical files like this high. I couldn't even see past it. It was just stack of files, and the paralegal told me that these discovery responses were due, I think within that week. I think it was like less than half a week. And I was like, okay. And I think for the first time in my life, I had a mental breakdown. I was like, what did I just invest my whole life into since like middle school? I was like, oh, okay, I wanted to be here. I was so eager to be here. I finished undergrad in 2 years to be here. And it was not it. I was having a breakdown. I freaked out because it was ongoing. Like anytime I cleared up maybe half of it, it would be like another full set and it was never ending. And it would be due like that day or day after. And so I just remembered as the time went on and as I continued to practice law, and I was trying to compare like how come different lawyers have different lifestyles and how come I'm so stressed? And I realize it's because I actually care. It's hard for you to go on vacation knowing you have deadlines, knowing you have cases that are on your desk not being touched and being happy. It's really hard because I know that nobody can work on the case as well as I can. And even if there are support staff, they can only do so much because they're not lawyers. So they're not doing the critical analyzing thinking that you do when you train to do when you are in law school and you get that part of the brain working and all of that. But it was eye-opening, and I came to the realization eventually that this is just how it's going to be, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It'd be nice for me to go on vacation and close my eyes and hope that everything's going to go well, but that's just not reality. So if you actually care about your clients, there's just no way for you to be at peace ever. You just dream about cases and wake up and it's like never ending.
Yeah, I
Oh.
bet that was a crazy wake-up call. So, were there any early experiences during school or right after school that pointed you toward personal injury specifically?
Yes. So when I actually first thought about going to law school back in middle school, high school time, it was actually influenced by my parents' divorce. So they went through a very long divorce process because they just absolutely despised each other. My dad had an attorney who was a billable attorney. So those attorneys, you usually pay them a retainer, 5 to 10,000, depending on the complexity of the case. And as time goes by, the attorney chips away at the retainer. And when they run out of money and the case is still ongoing, my dad would have to pay another 5, 10 grand, whatever the retainer was. So just that fact alone, it made me realize, oh, this attorney has an incentive, has a reason to keep this case going and being dragged along as possible because the more the case is active, then the more the attorney can bill. For my mom, she had an attorney who worked on a flat fee, which was pretty nice. When you first think of it, it's a larger lump sum. I think it was like 20 grand, some family law attorney out in LA. And she paid that upfront, and then it was guaranteed to get what finalized until the divorce finalized whatever hours of work that the attorney needed to put in. But then I also realized I noticed the work ethic on the attorney side on my mom's end was not there because he already got paid. So he would always punt his work off to like associates, new associates, or assistants that really didn't know anything about the case. And I went through that as well. And so it was just a really bad time. And I thought to myself, okay, I think I'm going to be a family law attorney. I want to do things the right way and not overbill and just bill enough to get whatever is needed to be accomplished. So when I went to Whittier during the orientation, they had time where kind of like breakout rooms, they had these rooms where people would go based off of what they thought they wanted to do. And so I went into the family law clinic. And when I went in there, they started doing a presentation about what is included in family law. What does it involve? What kind of cases do you see? And in my head, I'm thinking it's just custody, divorce, allocation of assets, just whatever it was that I went through. But there was a lot of intimate, very emotionally intense situations as well, like surrogates, stepfathers having criminal activities with the kids, and it was a lot. So I was like, you know what? I think it's a little bit too intense for me. I don't want to be involved in that kind of heated environment. And so I told myself after orientation, great, now I'm here. I thought I wanted to do family law, but I don't. And for the first time, I think I was worried. I feel like up until law school, I had everything planned out since middle school. I was like, I'm just going to get there. And then I got there and it wasn't what I wanted to do. And then I was worried. I was like, okay, now what do I do? What do I want to do? And I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to worry about that right now. Let's just focus on school. So I just did classes. I went to school and I was doing well. I was performing well. And the news got around that I was performing well. So there was this one girl, she was a colleague, and she came to me and she confided in me. She was worried because she was put on probation for not achieving her basic GPA. I don't remember what it was at the time, but she was asking me for studying techniques and she was freaking out that she wasn't going to be able to come back the next semester. And I told her because I knew about her. She actually applied to law school and started law school because she worked at a personal injury firm. And this firm, she performed so well that the partners had advised her, hey, go to law school, get your degree, we'll hire you on as an associate. And so I told her, I was like, you don't even need to worry about having good grades. You just have to pass and you just have to pass the bar and you have a job aligned before you even step through these doors. Sure, I may have the best grades and I may do well academically, but I'm not going to have a job after this. I thought I wanted to do family law and I don't know what I want to do now. And I'm just doing school and that's it. And for some reason, she lost sleep over that comment. I don't know why. I was just trying to console her. And the next day she came to me. She's like, I couldn't sleep last night. If you want to do personal injury, I can help you get your first job. And I said, I don't even know what personal injury is. I've never heard of that. I was like, get me the job. I'll do it. I'll take it.
Yeah, that's perfect. That yeah, I was looking just for a specific moment, kind of that you wanted to go into personal injury. And so that was great. So I'm curious about your roots, and I know you touched on it a little bit, but are you originally from Inland Empire area, or did you come here for your practice? And if you're not originally from here, what brought you to Inland Empire, and how does your background influence the way you approach your work?
Yes. So I am originally from the IE, the Inland Empire. I was born and raised in the city of Moreno Valley, which is about two cities over from where my office is at now here in Norco. And so that's where I was originally from. And then when I went to law school, so growing up in the Inland Empire in the IE, I don't want to use the word ghetto, but it's more of a rural area with a lot of low income families and not a lot of connections, not a lot of stuff going on, bunch of tumbleweeds in the summertime. And the goal, it's a general consensus. All the parents, all the kids, we all know that the goal to be successful and to be considered that you have made it, quote unquote, made it, is to get out of the IE and to make it into OC, Orange County, or LA, Los Angeles. And if you can thrive and live in Orange County and Los Angeles, then you have made it. And so the goal is to get out and not to stay in. So when I went to law school, it wasn't by choice. It was because there was no law schools that were ABA accredited in the Inland Empire. So I ended up going to Orange County. And then when I got there, my first exposure to law firms were out there as well. And naturally, by the time I was about to graduate, I had a job lined up at a trial firm that does personal injury in Orange County. And so I took that position and I got the experience that I needed. I worked there for maybe 2 or 3 years of my law school career, and after I passed the bar as an attorney for 1 year. And then after that, I thought to myself that there's people in the Inland Empire who aren't served. There's lawyers out there who do personal injury, but they don't do it in an aggressive way that you learn in Orange County. There's like a style in Orange County, and I don't know if it's just because it's so heavy and there's just a lot more car accidents and there's just a lot more heavier caseload, but there's a lot you learn in Orange County, but none of that. So anybody with that kind of knowledge stays in Orange County or goes to LA. Nobody goes back to the IE. And I felt like we were missing that. And it felt bad because everybody is so eager to leave. And then everybody that remains aren't represented properly and they don't know. Like even to this day, I have some friends from high school reach out when they have legal troubles and they're like, "You're the only attorney I know." Like to this day, that's a thing. And it's really sad. I can't believe that there's not more attorneys that come out of those regions. And so I thought to myself, we need to bring OC type of representation back. I need to bring that back to where I'm from. And I'm not ashamed of where I'm from. And I feel like when I'm here, I have a lot of love for the people here. And I feel like I'm helping my family. That's how I feel. And so that's why I ended up coming back here and picking this location in the IE.
That's amazing. That's so cool to hear that you went out there and learned about what the OC is doing and then brought it back. That's incredible. And so, for people listening who aren't sure if you can help them, what regions does Empire Law actually serve?
We are located in Norco and Eastvale. That's where, and I'm not sure about I'm supposed to say this, but that's where like our SEO is. That's where we're located, headquartered, I guess, is where our physical location is. And then naturally that kind of expands the Google search realm to the Inland Empire. But I don't know how technical we want to get, but technically I can represent anybody in California. If it's identity theft, it's federal law, so I can represent anybody in the United States for that.
Okay, and personal injury is a pretty broad category. I know Empire Law Firm handles motor vehicle accidents, slips and falls, wrongful death cases. But within personal injury law, are there specific types of cases you and your team focus on most? And what drew you to those particular cases?
I think naturally we have a lot, probably 95% of our cases are car accidents. I feel like most of our cases are car accident cases or motorcycle accident cases, some kind of pedestrian motorcycle auto type accidents. And I think that's just because that's where everybody has most of their day to day. That's what happens. I feel like everybody encounters, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people, that's the day to day thing that accidents happen: motor vehicle accidents, bike accidents, motorcycle, pedestrian. And then we have slip and falls too, but I guess people don't slip and fall as often. Dog bites are a little bit more on the rare side too. I don't think people could get bit by dogs very often, but we do those too. And identity theft, of course, we do that as well.
I didn't know that identity theft fell under personal injury law. That's
It's actually not. It's actually under consumer law. So I don't even know if I'm supposed to be bringing this up, but it is something that we do here. And it's protecting the people from big banks, big credit bureaus like Experian, TransUnion, from harassing them to make payments on loans or accounts that were opened that they didn't create themselves, that they were a victim of identity theft, and these companies don't listen to them and they just keep pursuing them, or it hurts their credit and now they can't let's say, apply for student loans. They can't buy their first house. There's lots of things that can happen. But yes, it falls under consumer law.
Okay, super interesting. And before we move on, I know there are a lot of misconceptions out there about personal injury attorneys. So, what is one thing that you wish more people understood about what you and other personal injury lawyers actually do for accident victims?
Of course, I'm sure any personal injury attorney would probably think of these two words, that it's something that everybody calls us as ambulance chasers. There are actually lawyers out there that do that, but I don't do that. I feel like we have enough accidents that happen every day and they come to us, so we don't need to go out there and chase ambulances. But I think aside from injuries, and I think this is what really sets us apart from other firms, is that our contingency and our money that we make as a firm, we take a contingency from the bodily injury, right? And so a lot of these firms, they focus on the pain, the suffering, the injuries, which we do as well. That's a given. But a lot of them, they don't help with the property damage. And not only the property damage, as in helping coordinate inspections and coordinating rentals, getting their car fixed. If the car is not fixable, it's not repairable because it's totaled, then making sure that the compensation that they're getting for their vehicle is a fair compensation. If that compensation leaves them upside down on their loan for their car, then there's gap insurance that comes into play. So we help them navigate that, because gap claims, they typically have a 30 to 60-day window. If you don't finalize the claim within those days, you cannot have your loan forgiven. So that too. And then the biggest one, where I think we're probably the only one that does this, is asking for compensation for diminution in value. The laws on basic car accidents, bodily injury, property damage is, if somebody has hurt you and caused damages, they need to put you at a place that you were prior to the accident happening. So they need to make you whole, even though they can't take away your injuries. That's why they compensate with money instead. But they need to put you back and take into consideration everything that you went through and compensate for everything and put you back to where you were prior to. Now, what that means when it comes to property damage is, if you get your car fixed, the insurance companies like to claim that they put you back in a spot you were before the accident because your car is fixed. It looks fine. They fixed it. But what happens is, when you go to CarMax or wherever you go to try to sell your car, now it shows that you were in a car accident, and that depreciates the value of the car. Just that fact alone, even though it looks like it hasn't been in an accident, it has. And it affects the value of your car. So we also help in getting compensation for that as well.
Wow, there's so many little things that like you don't think about until you're in that situation. So that's great that you have that experience and you're able to step in for your clients and help them. So now that we know about your background and how you got here, let's talk about what drives the work today. What's the mission behind Empire Law Firm?
If it were me and I had to say, out of everything that I've done with all these clients, I feel like the most important thing is to make the clients feel heard. Number one is make sure that they feel like we're listening to them. And we are listening to them, but the insurance companies don't. So we need to make sure that whatever concerns they have, that it's addressed, and they feel like there's somebody on their side who knows how to navigate the process that they don't know how to navigate themselves. And they can feel relief and burden free from having to worry about the nitty gritty of dealing with insurance companies. And they can just focus, especially if they're injured, they can just focus on their recovery. And then we take the load off of them and deal with everything else.
So when you think about why this firm exists, what are you and your team ultimately trying to accomplish?
Ultimately, we're trying to accomplish just compensation, but also taking into consideration the client's best interests. Because sometimes And some other attorneys are like this too. They get so gung ho and they get so tunnel vision on getting 100% of what the case is worth, right? So that's also something that we know that a lot of clients don't, is based off the facts. We know, okay, your case is worth XYZ, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to go through all the litigation and all the trial and put the client through, let's say, defense medical examinations and depositions, and then our fees going up to 40% if it's not ultimately going to benefit the client's mental health and emotional health as well. So, although money is the end goal, just compensation, it's only the end goal to the point that the client wants. So we have to always keep in mind that at the end of the day, this is our client's case, and we have to listen to what they want and we have to deliver what it is that they want to come out of the case. And if it's not something that aligns with our firm, then maybe there's so many firms out there. So I feel like there's a right attorney for every client, whatever their goals are.
So I'm curious about the strategic side. When you take on a case, let's say a car accident with significant injuries, how do you develop your strategy and what's going through your mind in those early stages?
Number one is always going to be the client's needs. So I don't know what my end goal is without hearing what the client's desires are. So if depending on that first initial conversation that I have with the client, they will tell me or talk to me about things that concern them. And the more they talk about a particular subject, I know, oh, that's their concern. That's their worry. So that's usually how I will strategize, how I will work on a case. It'll be dependent on what is the client trying to achieve. And I guess dependent on that, it'll trigger different kinds of conversations and different questions.
What's like the first thing you look at when deciding whether to take on a case?
Probably the date of the accident. So sometimes people will call and they'll be like, I got into an accident and it was like a year ago. And then I'm kind of worried. And my worry is I'm kind of worried. And my worry is what has been done already on their end without any attorney guidance, because any kind of statement you make as a client to an insurance company is used against you whenever they can. If there's anything that you've said and they can twist it, they will twist it. When accidents have happened a long time ago, I do worry about what has already been said to the insurance companies, how the car was fixed or not fixed. And then the main concern is going to be treatment if they are in pain, because we believe our clients. Like our clients will be like, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, I'm experiencing this, experiencing that. And that's all good and dandy. But these insurance companies want proof, right? They're not going to just listen to me and say, oh, okay, here you go. Here's compensation for everything that, your client's going through. They want to see that you have had treatment and they want to see that it was consistent treatment and they want to see that the clients are putting in their effort to getting better. So that is something is more like a red flag, I guess. So I do look at time. That's one of the things I look at if that's an issue. So fresher, the better. There are times that we still do take on cases that are old, but that's usually because they have been consistently treating on their own. So there are situations where I took on a case that was over a year old, but she was going through her health insurance and she was treating and doing everything that she needed to do. And she was trying to avoid having an attorney. Most of the clients are like that. They don't want to cause trouble and they don't want to cause issues. And so sometimes that can actually be a disservice to them. And it's a benefit to the insurance companies when they try to lay low and they try to minimize everything they're going through because they're thinking they don't want to burden other people. But what it really is just, we're just asserting our rights and getting everything that is owed to our clients. That's just the way I see it. It's owed to them. So we just take it and we give it to the clients.
Yeah, definitely. That talks a little bit about your case evaluation. And so once you've taken on that case, how do you go about gathering evidence and building it out?
If compensation is the goal and the client is seeking maximum compensation and we're on the same page, we're both seeking maximum compensation, whatever we can grab for the clients and maximum case value, whatever their case is worth. The first thing I have to look at is what kind of insurance policies are we looking at? We have to look at our clients' own insurance policies. And a lot of times this kind of gives clients a little bit of, they don't feel very comfortable when it comes to talking about their own insurance, their own auto insurance, because they think, oh, if I touch my insurance, my premium's going to go up. But by California law, they're not allowed to. When I say they, the insurance companies are not allowed to increase your premiums just because you file a claim. You would have to be at fault for the ding. I call it a ding. It's like the blemish, the mark to be left on your profile, and then your premiums get raised. So the way I see it and the way I like to explain it sometimes is when you have a car accident and there's two cars, one of them gets the mark. One of them is the one that's at fault. And so whoever that person is, they get their premiums raised. It's not everybody. So when we have to look at our own client's insurance to see what kind of potential compensation is available for our client through their own policy. And then also the other side, what kind of coverage are we looking at with the other side? And the other side is a lot more difficult because the insured, meaning the defendant, the driver, they don't have any legal obligations to us. They do not owe us any legal obligations to disclose what their policies are. Our clients' insurance companies do have a legal obligation because we represent our clients, and our clients' insurance companies are required to give us a copy of whatever it is that we're asking for that belongs to our client. But the other side, they don't have to. So when we still ask, and we ask for the coverage information, the insurance company will send out a letter to their insured asking them to sign off to authorize disclosure of their policy limits. And 99% of the time that never happens. So it's always important, if this is going to be a general advice for any people out there with or without an attorney, or with or without an accident, is to make sure you have medical payment coverage under your own insurance company, and then also uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage under your own insurance policy, because there's so many situations where the other side does not have any insurance, or they have very little and they cause significant injuries. And the next thing you know, our clients are kind of SOL because they don't have insurance or they don't have their own adequate coverage. So I think about it as, insurance companies like to phrase it as if you are protecting your assets just in case you cause an accident. And that's what you think insurance is supposed to do. But nowadays, the way people are driving around and all the heavy congested traffic, it's really to protect yourself just in case you get, because usually the people that are causing the crazy accidents, the ones that really leave you debilitated and cause you severe injuries, are the ones that have nothing to lose. They usually roam around with no insurance.
That's a really good way to look at it. That's great advice for all the people out there listening. And so, how involved are your clients in the strategic decisions along the way?
Depends on the client. And I'm sure, if you've interviewed any other attorneys, it depends. Everything depends on everything. But it does depend on the client. We like to keep them in the loop as much as they want to be kept in the loop. Every client is different. Some people, typically like people who are engineers, they're very, or even like accountants, they're very like into the details, the nitty gritty. They want to know everything. They want to know our strategy, why our strategy, and how that compares to a different path that we may or may not take. And then they will come to a decision of, I agree or I don't agree. Hopefully it's I agree, because usually we want to be aligned as far as strategic moves go. And then there's some clients who have more of an anxiety type of personality, where they're more worried about things. And that's why they hire us in the first place, because they're just freaked out, they're overwhelmed, and they don't know what to do. They don't like all this information being spewed at them at one time. And so with those kinds of clients, we'll be more tactful and maybe we'll give them more significant updates, like when we feel like we need to tell them something to make a decision or the next steps, and to keep them informed about the bigger parts of the case and to let them know what's going on, as opposed to them being involved in the thinking process. So it depends on the client and how much they want to be involved in.
So, from intake to resolution, what are the core services your firm provides throughout that whole process?
If the client hasn't already opened up their claim, hopefully they haven't. We like to be the ones to open up the claim and speak to the insurance companies just because we know what words to say and not to say. So we will open up the claims. After the claim has been opened, we will send out what we call letters of representation to let the insurance companies know that we represent the client, and any future conversations and communications needs to be done through us and not through the client. And then the first thing that's usually on people's mind when it comes to car accident cases is going to be their car. A lot of firms out there, they do focus on the bodily injury, but it's if your car is not repaired and you can't drive, how are you going to go to your medical appointments? We do focus on the car. We focus on getting the inspection coordinated and then setting up rental if available. If there is no rental available, we ask for what's called loss of use compensation, which is the compensation for in money in a situation where the client had to repair their car or their car was totaled and they could not drive their car. They lost the use of their vehicle from X to Y date. And so we ask for compensation for that if they don't have a rental. And then if it's totaled, we will help with the total loss settlement, making sure that the number that they're getting, the compensation they're getting for their vehicle is a fair compensation, is a fair amount. And if not, then we do negotiate that. We have actually, which is probably another thing that's very special about us. I have hired people. We have a whole department that just focuses on property damage, which is rare to find because that's basically money out of my pocket because we typically don't get paid from helping people with their cars. But I think it's a very basic, so it just comes hand in hand. I feel like we just have to do that. So we help with that. And then if their car is totaled and the price, the value of their car is worth less than how much is left over on their balance because they purchased the car when it was worth more, or the salesman sell them the car for too high of a price, then sometimes the clients have what's called gap insurance, and those have an expiration date. Once the accident happens, you have either 30 to 60 days, depending on whatever it says in the contract, the gap insurance contract, to open up and finalize the claim. And if you do not send them all the documents that they ask for within that window, then they will not cover for whatever's upside down and outstanding on your loan. Then even after you get your total loss figured out, all the money that was from the total loss goes to the lien holder, and then you're still left with a bill and monthly payments. So that's a pretty crappy situation. So we help with that. And then in that time, setting up their car and making sure that's all figured out. If their car is repairable, then despite the car looking like it's never been in an accident, it has. And so if the client ever goes and tries to sell their car, CarMax or any other used car dealer, that blemish, because you filed a claim with the insurance company, that blemish already depreciates the value of the car. Then a similar car that's never been into an accident is worth more. So we always ask for compensation for that as well. And then when that's all figured out, then we also help with the medical treatment if the client needs to. Sometimes clients have really good health insurance and they don't really need help. They have PPO, so they can go wherever they want, see whoever they want, whenever they want. But some people, a lot of people, they have Medi-Cal or government aid, Medicare, and a lot of these health insurance, government sponsored health insurance, it's really hard to get the treatment that the client's need in a timely fashion. And sometimes it's hard to get approvals and it's very long wait. So if there's situations where the client's in a lot of pain and their health insurance, sometimes doctors, they even straight up refuse to see you the moment you say you got into a car accident because these doctors, they know that the case could possibly be litigated in the future and they don't want to get dragged into a potential lawsuit. So they'll straight up just say, no, you can't be seen here. And so sometimes that happens. And in situations like that, if the client needs help, we'll help coordinate some medical treatment of whatever it is that they may need and then make sure they're all better. And then when they're all better, and hopefully they are, sometimes unfortunately they're not. But when it comes to a point where we feel like, okay, it's time to ask for compensation, we have that conversation with the client and we send out what we call a demand in our world, but it's essentially a settlement proposal letter that we present to the insurance companies after we gather all of the evidence, whether it be medical records, medical bills, case stubs, if there's any residual property damage claims that still hasn't been addressed, any kind of documents in relation to that, pay stubs for lost wages. We submit that over to the insurance company and then they have 30 days by law, California law, they have 30 days to respond to that. And so that's how the process goes. If it settles, well, I guess after it settles, it's not over. So after it settles, a lot of times attorneys will just cut off the client's treatment if they're treating on what we call a personal injury lien. And we will just, not we, but attorneys will stop treatment and the case is over and they just give the clients whatever compensation and then send them on their way. But I feel like it's cold and it also doesn't really wrap things up very nicely. And so if there's a situation where the case settles for the maximum compensation that is available to the clients prior to them concluding their medical treatment, we always make sure that they're still set and they have options and they know what their options are moving forward if they want to continue their medical care. So they should be kept in the loop of that. And then of course, making sure that the bills are all paid. So by the time the case is over, in the sense that it's closed out on our end, the client has nothing to worry about. They can move on with their life and put this all behind them and continue living life and move on from all of the trauma from the accident and everything, the recovery and all.
So, one of the big decisions in personal injury cases is whether to settle with the insurance company or take the case to court. So, what is your philosophy when it comes to negotiation versus litigation, and how do you approach that decision with your clients?
As far as negotiation versus litigation, I think it's always good to have multiple people involved when it comes. And when I say people, not just the client, but people within the firm as well. Because for me, I don't really like to negotiate. For me, my brain goes from, okay, I am asking X dollars and you have lowballed me. And when I say lowball or you, I'm talking about the insurance companies. And the moment the insurance companies lowball and I feel like the gap is too wide. And when I say too wide, I'm talking about, let's say, if we were to litigate it, our fees do go up to 40%. So I have to take that into consideration. If we're only, let's say, a couple $1,000s apart, then it's probably not worth litigating and having our fees go up 40% and incurring, let's say, $500 just to file the lawsuit, another couple $100 to hire a private investigator, go serve the lawsuit, and then go through the whole litigation process for many months after that for the client to go and sit through a deposition that could be anywhere between 4 to 7 hours long. No need to put them through all that over a couple $1,000s. It has to be worth it. But of course, that's also based off of the client communication. Some people, they don't care about what they walk away with. They're trying to teach them a lesson and they're trying to teach, when I say them, the insurance companies, they feel hurt. And that's typically when clients actually come. I hear it all the time. They always start off with, I actually never wanted to hire an attorney. I wasn't even thinking about hiring an attorney. but the insurance company isn't listening to me. That's always what it comes down to. It's the insurance company not listening when they throw a settlement offer out there and the client is, but what about my treatment? But what about my pain? But what about this imaging I need? And they're like, no, yeah, here's $100 more. But it doesn't answer the question. Just throwing money out there doesn't answer the questions and address their concerns. And so that kind of conversation needs to be had with the client. Some clients are like, I want to have the fees go up to 40%. And even if it means I walk away with nothing at the end of it all, I want this to be litigated and I get full value. But some people, if they have, let's say, anxiety, and I know just based off of my relationship with them that I've built during the case, I see that they're probably going to have some troubles with things like depositions. And when I say depositions, these are sometimes in person after COVID, most of it's on Zoom, but these are recorded interviews that the other side's attorney does. And they will sit there and drill you for anywhere between 4 to 7 hours, asking you all these million questions. And people get nervous. People don't want to go through that. And people get panic attacks, and I can gauge it based off of just the relationship we have. At this point, I can see, okay, they're going to be able to do it or they're not going to be able to do it. And if that's the case, regardless of what I think the case is worth and what I think we should do to get the proper compensation, ultimately that can hurt the client's mental and emotional health and well-being. And so I think that's a big no-no. So there's been a situation where, let's say, we had a offer. I think it was around like 50 grand, but in my head, I said, okay, this case is worth 100 grand. So I talked to a client and I talked to them about going through litigation and what that entailed and what that meant for them. And they said, absolutely not. I don't feel comfortable suing the person, or I don't feel comfortable going through litigation. I don't remember exactly what it was, but she was very against the idea. And I said, okay, if that is the case, we are not getting what I think you deserve, what I think you fully deserve. We will be leaving money on the table. And she was okay with that. So ultimately, I think it's as long as the client is well informed and they know what it means to choose path A versus path B versus path C and what that means and the end result, if they are happy with their choices and I know that they made that decision, then I'm happy too. And of course, we will still get the most we can within that given circumstance. So whatever is available, we will scrape off as much as we can without adding the burden onto the clients.
Yeah, that kind of leads into this next question on how do you define success? And for you and for Empire Law Firm, what does a successful case look like? And is it purely about the settlement amount or verdict, or are there other factors? I feel like you talked a little bit about that in your answer to the last question.
Yes. So success is not always about compensation. I think, unless it is for that client, it's dependent on what the client wants. But at the end of the day, I feel like I've succeeded in the course of a case, the duration of a case, the resolution of a case, when I don't know if happy is the right word, but because sometimes they're still injured. So it's not necessarily a happiness, but I know and the clients know that we've brought peace. I think peace is probably going to be the key word here is the clients can now move on comfortably with their life and forget whatever has happened in the past, unless it's a traumatic injury. So that's pretty rough, but there's a closure to that chapter and it's a peaceful closure. And now they can move on, and whatever compensation it is that they receive, they can utilize that to further their careers or further their future endeavors, whatever it may be. And I think there was one time where we had a younger client and he said, oh, with this settlement money, I've always wanted to give back to my mom. So I think, booked a trip and paid for everything for, I think, Hawaii or something for him and his family. And so I think it's whatever it is that they want to do and to move on and be content and at peace and then forget about whatever's happened. I think that's probably success. for a
Yeah.
case.
Before we move on, is there anything about how you practice or how Empire Law Firm operates that might surprise people? Something that's not typical in personal injury law. I feel like even as you were talking about earlier, how you guys handle a little bit of the property damage and how some other firms don't handle that.
Yeah, I think that's probably gonna be the biggest surprise. It's a surprise to me too, in the sense that it's a newer thing that we've added on to our firm, but it's something that clients always used to ask. And when I used to work at different firms, they I never really had an answer to it other than the insurance companies do not allow for that within their policies. But that was a disservice to the clients that when I think back on it, because it is technically the diminution in value is a damage. It is something that the clients sustain only due to an accident happening on their car. And it's unfair that the insurance companies get away with just replacing the bumper when later on down the line now they try to sell the car and it's being offered, let's say, maybe salvage value or junk value compared to another car who hasn't been in an accident. And then they're trying to utilize that money to purchase another car. They're not made whole. I don't think they are made whole if we just leave it at that. So it is something that we do specifically here. I don't think I've heard of any other firms that do it, but it is to get compensation for the diminution in value. And if we have to litigate it, we will. Same thing with the loss of use. A lot of attorneys, they don't do loss of use, which is when you're without a rental. Sometimes these, especially when the other side is disputing liability. And when I say that, they're not accepting that they are at fault for the accident. They will refuse to fix your car. And if our client doesn't have collision coverage under their own policy, they have no choice but to wait for the other side to accept liability. And sometimes that can take months, it can take years, but every single day they are without their car, it's adding value to that particular claim. And there's been times where I've actually litigated and filed a lawsuit just for the loss of use of the vehicle because they didn't accept liability for almost a year. And I think that one was it was tens of thousands of dollars. It's just things like that. I think there's a lot of things that attorneys want, like the easy fruit, the easy pickings, what they're used to, garden variety. But there's a lot of things that people don't, I guess, try to get creative and really get every single thing out there that's possible for the clients and making sure that every leaf is not left unturned.
So, over the course of your career, I'm sure there have been cases that really stand out. And so, what are some of the cases or achievements you're most proud of? Not necessarily the biggest headlines, but ones that meant the most to you.
Probably one of the ones that is more fulfilling. This is more of as a lawyer because a lot of times, even after you litigate a case and the case gets filed in as a lawsuit and you're going through the motions, you're going through discovery and all the other legal jargon up until trial, the first 3 times this has happened to me, I was so deflated. So what happens is, so in California, you have 2 years before you have to file a lawsuit. So let's say the client has been treating for 2 years, they're still treating. We have no choice but to file the lawsuit for the purposes of protecting what we call the statute of limitation. Because if we don't file it in 2 years, we can't file it ever. And we can't ask for any compensation. So they're still treating. So we filed a lawsuit. So 2 years has already gone by. And the client is exhausted too. This is mentally exhausting on the client because this is the first time they're usually going through something like this. For us, 2 years is more like 2 weeks. It feels like 2 months. It goes by very quickly. But for them, it feels like a very long time. And then once you get into litigation, that only increases by like 5 times because what'll happen, especially in California, because we have such a big backlog because everybody sues everybody for whatever. When you go to the judge and you ask them for a trial date, they will typically give you a trial date, let's say 2 years ahead of time. And after you get this trial date, now the client has to go through the case with you for, let's say, the next 2 years. So they've already done 2 years and they have 2 years more, and then they got 4 years. And there's always opportunities to settle anytime. But a lot of these games that these insurance companies play is they want to see who blinks first. And sometimes that means you have to get all the way to trial before the case settles for what the case is worth and what you want for the client and what the client deserves. And it becomes so deflating because when you do trial prep, it is very intense. It's binders that fill up half of a room, and then you put them all these trolleys and you have to bring them to the court. And not only that, but you actually have to coordinate with the other side and have them sign off on it, which is always a headache because they never like to sign off on anything. They don't want to agree to anything. And then when you go to court and you say that the other side didn't sign off on it, only we get chewed out. We're the only ones that get chewed out because it's our case. So we're supposed to figure that out. And their goal is always to delay it as long as possible because they're billables. So the longer they can keep the case open, the more money they make because the more that the attorneys can bill the insurance companies. So it's a whole thing. But then you get all the way, you park in, let's say, a mile from the courthouse, you walk your way into the courtroom, and then the case settles. It's always so deflating. And so that happens a lot of times. And then after the first 3 times, I've learned it's just part of the game. It's sad. Like it's something that you just have to do. It's just part of the motions. They have to know that you're serious. And if they sense that you're not serious, they'll just continue to lowball you until they realize, okay, this is really going to trial, and then they fold. So those are like the cases. The first 3 times that's happened, that's where I've learned that. And then the other more memorable part was there was a case going through the client's insurance company. When you have a dispute with your client's own insurance company lowballing your own client, you are not allowed to sue the insurance company like you are in a normal car accident when you're suing the defendant driver. In a situation where you have a dispute with your own client's insurance company to collect compensation, there is in their long contract that when you sign your premiums to get your policy, within that contract, there's something called an arbitration provision. And basically, what it says is if you have any problems with us and you don't agree with how we handled your claim, you have to sue us behind closed doors. So we can't do it with the jury. And that's because if we did, we would see probably every insurance company out there, so many lawsuits, and it's just not good look for them. So we do it behind closed doors, and we hire a judge, a retired judge. They're called arbitrators to be the trial judge at the very end in the arbitration. So they will determine, like, instead of a trial date, you get an arbitration date, and they are to determine what the outcome of the case is. And so our case is in the hands of this one person. And so this client, their own insurance company, which he's since then moved on to a different one because after this experience, it was pretty traumatizing for him. But they didn't offer anything. They said that he's made whole and there's $0 that we need to give because he's already gotten enough compensation from the other side. And there's not a penny more that they'll give. And we disagreed. So we went through this process called arbitration. And during the arbitration, this arbitrator, he showed up like 30 minutes late, and he was all frazzled and putting on his jacket. And it looked like he just got up out of bed. And so I was a little concerned. It seemed like he didn't really care, and it wasn't a good start. I was like, okay, he's not taking this case seriously. He forgot about it, clearly. And during that arbitration, when I was cross-examining, and when I say cross-examining, that means I am asking a witness from the other side. So in this situation, it was an expert witness, one of their doctors that the insurance companies hired to explain why all the medical treatments that our clients got was unnecessary and that our client should have been completely fine with just a little bit of chiropractic treatment or something like that. And when I was asking questions to with this doctor from the other side, I ended up having that doctor end up admitting and making statements that were in favor of our client, which is really rare because they are paid by the insurance companies to not help our clients. But it was such a big moment for me. But what was so sad is that this arbitrator, he was just so old and he just did not care. And I think he just had way too many arbitrations on his plate. He didn't it's not like a trial where they give you the results, like, right then and there, where the jury comes out with the verdict and they tell you what happened and who's the winner and who's the loser and all of that. He took it under what we call submission. So he after the arbitration was over, after all the testimonies were given, he said, "Okay, we'll give you your results in a month." So I think whatever happened during that arbitration, he forgot it all. And so it just made me think, and the client too. It ultimately wasn't successful because whatever we unfolded during the arbitration, it wasn't taken into consideration because there's no court reporter, nobody's recording it. So there was no way for him to go back. So it was just him just trying to remember what was done. But the client still ended up walking away with pretty good chunk of compensation. It wasn't ideal that we weren't able to collect additional funds from the underinsured motorist coverage, but it was something that we learned that justice is not always done just because you do all the right things and say all the right things. There's so many different kinds of variables that can affect the way the case plays out. So ultimately it's a gamble.
Hmm.
But that's what I've learned with those cases. It's all like gambling, it's all kind of games, and it's really based off of who flinches first. And hopefully you pick the right arbitrator. We'll probably never pick that arbitrator again. But yeah, this was a lot of learning experience.
Yeah, definitely. That's a crazy story. I'm sure you've seen a lot of crazy stuff with all of that, and there's just so much to know. Beyond the cases that you take on, how do you contribute to the legal community? Whether that's mentoring, teaching, writing, are there ways that you're involved beyond your day-to-day practice?
As far as the legal community, I am part of the Hispanic Bar Association here in the Inland Empire, and then I'm also part of the Mexican Bar Association, which is funny because I'm not Hispanic nor Mexican, but it's there's a huge Hispanic community here, and I was actually invited to do these, what are they called? Kind of talk to other attorneys and do these events with other attorneys in the Inland Empire and discuss these issues that come about in the Hispanic community, which is interesting. It's not just the Hispanic community, but with everything that's going on, like politically and all the volatileness as far as our community goes, there's a lot of people out there that are scared to even make a claim because they're worried about their immigration status, they're worried about ICE being involved, or they're being deported. But it's very important to educate the communities to let them know that has no bearing on these insurance claims. I've never one time asked our clients for social security numbers. They don't it's not a relevant information as far as the status. The thing is you are hurt, somebody else caused your pain and suffering, and so they basically owe you compensation for what they have done to you regardless of where you're from. So I think I do a lot of outreach in that community to let them know what their rights are. And then outside of the legal stuff here in Norco, I'm actually the secretary of the Rotary Club here. And it's different when, even though we're in the service industry and we're helping people who need help after, let's say, they've been injured due to someone else's negligence, it's not as, I won't say satisfying, but you don't feel very fulfilled mentally and emotionally, like you've really helped make a change only because we also get paid for our work as well, which is interesting because when I'm part of this Rotary Club in Norco, we do a lot of manual labor, reaching out to the veterans here. There's a huge veteran community here and showing our appreciations for what they've done for us and the first responders as well. And then we go out into there's a lot of like older people in this area, and a lot of people they are too old to maintain their own yards and things like that. But we go out and go to the senior communities, we throw luncheons, weed whack people's yards and do these fundraisers and then use that money to provide scholarships for students, send them to leadership camps. They make lifelong friends there, do all these good things. And in return, I don't get any compensation for it. It's just an output. But for some reason, doing those activities and seeing the community and helping them in a way that's free is actually more satisfying to my soul and my heart and my mental being. Feel like I feel like so I do a lot of outside community work outside of the legal world. Although that eventually leads to legal stuff because there's not a lot of attorneys here. Like I was saying earlier, I'm honestly the only personal injury here in Norco and Eastville. There's no other ones besides me. And so whenever people have questions and I'm doing those outreaches, they naturally come to me and ask me questions. And I don't ever charge them for answers. But yeah, so I guess I do some pro bono work in that way. I consult with people and talk to them and give them advice. Not always legal, but whatever it is that they may need.
So that's super beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all about that. That's amazing to hear. I know a lot of attorneys have plaques on the wall, but are there any recognitions, awards, or honors that have actually been meaningful to you, ones that you feel reflect the work that you and your team are doing?
There's a lot of attorneys out there that actually purchase a lot of these awards. Like you can go out and purchase these awards, but I'm not the type to do that. It just seems silly. But there is one that you can't purchase, and that's the Super Lawyers Award. And it's only done through peer nominations, whether it be through from judges or other attorneys. And I think just a few years ago was when I got an email from Super Lawyers saying that I had been selected to be a rising star for that year. And since then, I've continued to hold that. So every year I get a notice saying that I have been selected, which is really interesting because I think it's only 2%. I don't know if it's 2% of Californian attorneys or if it's 2% nationally. That I don't know. But it's just nice to know that there's other attorneys and maybe not judges, but there's other people out there who have voted or nominated me for that position. And I find that to be very interesting and grateful because nobody's reached out to me and was like, hey, I voted for you. So I don't know who, but I think it carries weight as far as people that I work with in the legal community that they acknowledge that I'm doing something right. Or maybe they just like me. I don't know. So I'm very proud of the Rising Star Super Lawyer Awards.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Congratulations. I want to shift gears a bit. Let's talk about something that's top of mind in the legal world right now. What is your take on personal injury and car accident, and where do you see it heading within the legal system over the next few years?
So there's actually been a recent lawsuit that Uber has filed against a few downtown LA law firms. And it's due to, I don't know if it's even a word to be said, but like maybe shady business practices or of how they work up cases or maybe coordinated medical care. I don't know the nitty-gritty details, but I think the whole point of that lawsuit was just for Uber to stage it in a way to prepare for the bill that they were trying to pass, which is limiting the attorney's fees, I don't remember how much. I don't remember if it was like 25% or 15%, or it was a low amount. And then the medical bills were supposed to be paid through that part. Because typically attorney's fees in California when it comes to personal injury cases are 33 and a third, 33.3333%. If it goes to litigation, it's 40%. A lot of firms out there, they raise it to 45, depending on how deep in the litigation they get, 50% if it goes to trial. I think I've actually seen firms that raise their fees after 3 months of the date of loss, which is pretty gnarly because most cases don't resolve in 3 months. But if the fees get reduced down to, let's say, 20 to 15%, and then the medical bills have to be taken out of that 15 to 20%, it's actually a huge conflict in interest, in my opinion, when it comes to the client's recovery, because the attorneys will then have an incentive to keep the medical bills low because they're trying to get paid their fees, their reasonable fees. But at the same time, the clients need to get the treatment that they need. And so if this law does pass, I don't think it will because it is a conflict just by nature. It will cause a huge issue in the personal injury representation for the clients because lawyers will not want to take the case and they won't want to help them. And so the clients will be off on their own trying to fend for themselves and hope that they can navigate their way through the insurance world. But if that does happen, I think the pivot would be, at least for me, it would be to focus more on identity theft.
So, what innovations do you think will transform the legal profession, and how are you leveraging technology and maybe AI in your own legal practice right now?
As far as AI goes, not so much in the legal practice, but in marketing. A lot of clients, they actually, not a lot, but now more frequently, I've had clients that find us and they come in and I'll ask them like how they found us. And a handful of times I've heard them say like, "Oh, I just went on Chat GPT or Gemini and I asked the top 10 local lawyers, boutique firm, not too big, handles this kind of case, blah, blah, blah." And then, we pop up. So I think that's where AI is mostly used. As far as the cases go, I'm not a big fan. I've actually seen some of my staff utilize it, and it's pretty obvious, I think. And it's not, I think it works. I think AI works if you know the groundworks and you know how to think for yourself and you know how to tell the AI what to do. But if you are in a position where you're depending on the AI to do the work for you, a lot of times it gets into a situation where it's not always the best for the clients. So I think it can help, but once you depend on it, it can be a crutch. I think. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's awesome that you are getting, you know, prompts out there that are like AI is recommending you to people.
Yeah.
That's
I was
awesome.
like, "That's pretty cool."
Yeah. Um, so one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people don't really understand their rights or the legal process until they're already in a tough situation. So, how important is client education and legal awareness to you? And what role do you feel you play in helping people understand their options before they need a lawyer?
They kinda have to reach out first. So after they reach out, a lot of firms, and it's usually because they are bigger and they have to streamline the process. They go straight through the questionnaire, starting with the name, date of birth, the address, and all the demographics. And I feel like it's not very personal. And I don't think that's how people naturally talk. So I like the initial phone call and the initial conversation to be more of a conversation and getting to know each other and making sure we are the right fit for each other because different clients have different end goals and different clients have different personalities. And as long as we are both on the same page, then that's good. But if we're not, then, maybe there's a different attorney out there for them. But during that initial conversation is where they speak. And when you listen, you can hear the underlying concerns of what their major concerns are. And depending on those concerns, you will address those topics. For example, if let's say that particular client is worried because their car is in tow yard and they have to move and they don't have their car and they have to use their car to move or things like that, then my conversation isn't going to be so much geared on what to do with their medical treatment at that time. Although that's important too, it's going to be geared towards what do we do to fix this problem, fix this concern to alleviate your burden. And based off of, I will ask questions based off of that information and what information that I need to figure out, okay, that means your options are A, B, and C. If you go option A, these are the pros and cons. If you go option B, these are the pros and cons. If you go option C, these are the pros and cons. I recommend option A because of XYZ. What are your thoughts? And you always want to hear their thoughts out. And most clients, for the most part, they're calling you because they have no idea and they trust you. But they can only trust you if you spend the time to care and listen. And that communicates with the client. And if they feel like you are listening to them and you are trying to help them, then they are more willing to do whatever it is that you feel is best. And so most of the times you hear them say, "Oh yeah, whatever, I don't know, I trust you. Do whatever you think is best." But sometimes they're like, "Oh, I know you recommend option A, but then I have a problem with this because I think option B is better because blah blah blah." So when you have those conversations, more tidbits, informations come out, then you maneuver based off of whatever the client's needs are.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that it's very clear throughout this whole interview that you do care. And so that's great that your clients are feeling that from that first conversation. So let's get a little bit more personal in this next question. And I'd love to hear what are the guiding principles of your career? Is there like a quote, a motto, or a philosophy you come back to? And maybe are there any leaders in law or in business that you really admire or draw inspiration from?
A big thing, and we try to improve on this every day because the longer you have your firm, and it's an interesting thing because when you first start off, you don't have that many cases, and client communication is super easy to do because you can easily pick up the phone, answer whatever questions they have, and they feel good, they feel comfortable, and they can move on with their day. But as you continue to proceed with those cases and you do well with those cases, word of mouth goes out and then they refer people who get into car accidents and they come over and we grow to a point where it's hard to do that same thing. It's hard to pick up a phone when you're also trying to work on a case at any given point. And so trying to find that balance to figure out how to communicate with the clients because communication, I think, is key. I feel like that's the principle. I feel like whenever there's a situation, and this happens a lot, where we will actually take on a case where the client has been represented by another attorney. And the reason why they're looking is because they're saying that they're reaching out and no one's responding back. And clients hate being left in the dark. And I understand that. This is the first time they're going through that. And for case managers out there, because a lot of these firms, they're bigger and a lot of times the attorneys are touching the cases. It's usually their underlings, they're supervising. A lot of these times, the clients are reaching out and these case managers have a ton of cases to manage. So it's impossible for them to communicate or they're just not very good. They don't care. I don't know. But either way, the clients feel like their case isn't being worked on, they're not being listened to, and they're not getting their questions answered. So I think client communication is a really big principle as far as shaping my career. And it's been hard now, and I'm still trying to figure out how to keep that while growing. Because in the beginning, it's really easy. But then as you grow and the more clients you get, now you have to like schedule phone calls, which seems unnatural. I wish I could just pick up the phone and just answer any questions. But now we have to like schedule phone calls. But I want to make sure that the client is never left in the dark. I think that's the thing. It's the client should always know what's going on and what to expect and when to expect to hear from us next. And I think that's huge. And as far as who inspires me, it's interesting because when I was in law school, I would go to these events where attorneys mingle, and sometimes the attorneys will do seminars and they'll teach. And usually these are like big time trial attorneys where they're famous in our world. And so s- naturally, when I was younger and I would have a case where I didn't feel like I had the resources to handle, I would, let's say, refer the case over to these trial attorneys or try to refer the cases over. And then I started noticing because they always say things like, I don't know what it is. They always say, "No, we'll fight for you," but they always portray this image like they always help the underdogs and they always take the case all the way to the end. And that's why they try cases and then they get all these verdicts and help the clients and compensate or whatever. But when it came down to the case itself, if there was anything that was like a blemish on the case, they wouldn't accept it. And there were a handful of trial attorneys where I've noticed the same pattern where it's, oh, they get all these verdicts, but it's because the case is perfect and it's wrapped in a bow and there's no blemishes and there's nothing complicated about it. It's straightforward. And so, of course, they'll take it, they'll try it, and they'll win. But if it's complicated, they don't. So, a
Mhm.
lot of times I've been let down by a lot of these trial attorneys. But I think out of all the ones that I've worked with, and out of out of all of them, I continue to work with someone named Grayson Goody. He's, I think, out in Malibu, Goody Law Firm, Goody Law Group. But it's always a pleasure to work with him because sometimes these cases, it's not always about what you know, but it's about resources and manpower too. So sometimes if you want to do what's right by the client and you want to make sure that the case is litigated more aggressively than you can on your own, even if it means the clients, they only benefit from it. So you're just, the clients only get added attorneys, and basically you're creating like a room full of, you get like a team of attorneys for your case. But of course, that means the attorneys have to split the fees. But I think that's better. I think you have to do what's right by the client and you can't be greedy and you can't just keep the case for yourself because it's a great case. You have to make sure that if the case is going to be litigated, that it's going to be in the right hands and it's going to be litigated properly. And if you feel like you don't have that manpower, which sometimes I feel that way, it's always nice to have someone else on so we can have combine the efforts and make sure we're doing what's right by the client.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all that. All right. And for someone listening who's been in an accident or knows someone who has and thinks they might need legal help, what is the best way to get in touch with you? How does someone book a consultation or request a case valuation with Empire Law Firm?
Yes, we'd be happy to help. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Just visit our website or call us.
Yeah, awesome. So if you or someone you know has been injured in an accident in Inland Empire and needs expert legal representation, Deborah and the expert team at Empire Law Firm are here to help. You can reach them at empireaddy.com. That's EMPIREATTY.com, or give them a call directly at 951 724-5307. Deborah, thanks so much for being here and for sharing your story with us today. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
I do not. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I appreciate you.
it's been great to hear your story. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for the very first episode. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for the very first episode. Check the show notes for any links or resources, and we will see you next time.